welcome everyone out there that are not in attendance here. First, let me do some introductions. I'm Keith Collins. I'm the Community Resources Administrator for the City of Roanoke. Our office is part of the Department of Planning, Building, and Development, and our office administers entitlement funds from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, including home investment partnership funds, which are dedicated for affordable housing. The funds that we're looking at obtaining through this allocation plan are American Rescue Plan funds through HUD, through their home program, to address some housing needs. I also have with me Hope Browning. Hope is a community resource specialist in our office. She deals a lot in our public services and ESG and homeless issues, and she's spearheading the home ARP work for us and done great work. Also have Matt Cruikshank. Matt is the Human Services Administrator for the City of Roanoke. He oversees the HAC team, the Homeless Assistance Team, and he is under Department of Social Services and has been a key part in helping us put this plan together, or this input tonight. So, anybody want to add anything?
Okay. You're doing well.
We're here tonight to receive public input on how we can best use these home ARP funds to address affordable housing, particularly emphasis on homeless or those most at risk of homelessness. The city has other funds through our CDBG program and regular home entitlement that we're hoping to address larger community needs of affordable housing. So we're trying to bring as many resources as we can to the table, but these funds will be specifically targeted to housing for those who are homeless or those most at risk. But it is part of a larger plan to place an emphasis on the need for affordable housing here in the city of Roanoke for all lower income, low to moderate income residents. Do we want to go to the first slide? Okay. We could jump to that first slide, please. There we go. Okay. Home ARP. Again, this was part of $5 billion set aside by the federal government and signed into law in 2021, I believe. And these funds were put as part of the Home Investment Partnership program through HUD. City received about $3 million a couple of years ago in CARES Act funds. Those funds, however, could only be used for public services and homelessness, and we could not address housing with those funds, where we normally are able to use CDBG funds for housing. So these funds allow us to use these special allocation of funds to develop affordable housing in the city of Roanoke. We have been awarded a little bit over $2.4 million in this endeavor. Prior to being able to access that money, however, we have to have a housing study and a gap analysis as part of an allocation plan that we'll be submitting to Roanoke or to HUD. We've been utilizing consulting services to help us develop the plan. This is part of that process to gain public input. Once everything's done, and we will bring a plan to City Council for their consideration January, February. There will be a 30-day public comment period. We'd like to get so there'll be another opportunity to see or comment on where the priorities are placed for the use of these funds. Okay, these are, hope you want to tackle this.
All right.
Okay.
So these are eligible activities under the home ARP funds. So we can use these dollars for production or preservation of affordable housing. So that would just be bringing more affordable housing units to our community. We can use them for supportive services, which looks like many different things. It could be providing funds for case management services, mental health services, childcare, etc. We could also be using these funds for tenant-based rental assistance. That looks a lot like a housing subsidy program operated through the Housing Authority. So subsidizing somebody's rent based on their income to assist. Or we could use these funds to purchase and develop a non-congregate shelter. And so the non-congregate shelter just looks like an emergency shelter in which folks have their own private room to use, and there's no lease or anything because it's operating on an emergency basis, but everyone has their own private unit or room to stay in. And a lot of that's coming out of COVID as we realize that staying in congregate settings may not be the safest, especially when we're living during a global pandemic. So how can we better set up our emergency shelters for the future? The next one. This,
Yeah, I've already covered this. This is why we're here tonight. Part of the needs assessment and gap analysis and to receive public input in the development of this allocation plan. Some ground rules before we open up the floor for your comments. We do want to hear from you. We want to hear what your thoughts are. Be kind. Attack the problem, not the people. We're here to find solutions. Mutual respect and promote creative thinking. It's okay to think out loud. Some good ideas come out of that. Be succinct. We will ask you to keep your comments to 4 minutes or so. And also listen with an open mind. We have a microphone here. Anyone would you prefer to bring the microphone to you, or would you all like to, anyone to speak, come to the microphone, or we can bring it to you? Okay. All right. So we will open up the floor to receive comments. Again, this is being broadcast on YouTube channel, and I think we were probably supposed to be mic'd up. I hope they can hear us out there, but
Microphone right next to you.
okay, all right. Again, let's open the floor up to questions, comments, and we'd like to get your feedback. We'd like to hear who's here tonight. So, should have brought prizes to whoever went first. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is the Roanoke Housing Authority part of this process? Are they considered a stakeholder in it?
They're actually represented here tonight. So yes, we would. They're obviously a stakeholder in this. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hi.
so limiting and difficult, and you're on a clock because that voucher is only good for 60 days. And so we've had so many participants that have gotten the voucher, have pounded the pavement, have tried to find housing, and they can't. And then the last thing I'll say is that felonies are a big part of that. A lot of our participants that can't get that housing is because they do background checks. And so we really need a program that is specifically tailored to housing for people with a criminal record, because your average landlord is just not going to take them, and we need to support them. Otherwise, they'll just, again, turn back to criminal activity.
Thank you, Danny.
Hi, my name is Jeannie Christian. I'm a homeowner in southeast Belmont Park. And so as a homeowner, of course, this situation is
Right.
It's only by the grace of God that I'm not homeless, so I have nothing, no comment, no judgment towards anybody who is homeless at this point. The question I do have, I've heard from several different sources, and I've been trying to find out exactly who's paying for this, that there are people without homes that are being bused to Roanoke. An officer with the RPD told me that people as far as New York and Massachusetts are being bused into our area. And I've heard it from business owners who have homeless people hanging outside of their businesses, that they've been bused in from Richmond and Lynchburg. So I guess my question is who's paying for this, and what can we do to stop this? It's a twofold question, because we don't have the resources, obviously, to take care of our own, much less everybody else's. And the second question, I was working the polls, and a woman had walked from Morningside Manor to get to the polls. God bless her heart, because she had a walker and a rollator. She told me she had just moved here from Hampton Roads, and I'm from that area originally. I moved to Roanoke in '86. My question is she has an apartment at Morningside Manor. Now, I didn't say anything to her. I just welcomed her to the area. But why wouldn't residents or homeless people, especially people who have needs, because there are very few one-bedroom, senior-friendly, handicap-friendly apartments out there, why wouldn't a person who is locally situated get precedence over somebody that lives in Hampton Roads?
Thank you. Matt, do you want to just, we found some interesting data in our last point in time survey about where homeless are coming from.
Yeah, so we do an annual point in time count every January and every July. And one of the questions we ask is part of that point in time count. So it's a one-night snapshot of homelessness in the community. So we collect demographic information, but we also ask voluntary survey questions. One of the questions we ask is where folks came from when they became homeless. And typically every year about 60%, it's pretty consistent, about 60% of the folks that we count, their homelessness originated here in our region. This past July when we did our summer count, 70% of the folks that were outside on our streets, their homelessness originated here in the city. So the vast majority of the people that we serve, their homelessness starts here. We hear stories about people being bused from out of town frequently. I don't think it happens as frequently as we hear. Folks come to Roanoke occasionally.
But if you have 60 to 70% that originated here, that means we still have the 30% that are.
Right. Some of those are like.
It might not be 99%, but that's 30% that could be better served with the resources we have. Because we're
Right.
actually running out of resources, and that's our problem. Otherwise, we go out and buy some land and build more housing.
Right. Yeah, good point. I mean, so some of the people that come from outside the area may come from the New River Valley, Franklin County. We see places where there aren't services. Folks tend to come here because we have services. So I think the more those communities can build up their service system, we'll start to see folks less likely coming to Roanoke to access housing or access shelter. So, and I don't know, what was your second question? I knew you had a second part.
Why wouldn't a person that's from the Roanoke area be given precedence on a waiting list for Morningside Manor, which is handicapped, accessible, a one-bedroom apartment for, there are very few one-bedroom apartments out there, for the elderly, the handicapped and whatnot. So why wouldn't we give precedence to a person from the Roanoke area as opposed to giving it to a person from Hampton Roads?
That I don't know. I think that's a housing authority question. I'm not familiar with their policy on preference for residents, so I don't know, but.
All those public housing properties, just as the Section 8 list, they're all based on a waiting list. So every development that we have has a waiting list. And there's nothing, you said 15, 20 years ago, I was told that the occupancy rates in public housing here were about 85 to 90%. Now we're pretty much, the only reason we're never at 100 is simply because we're, getting units ready for someone to move in. So they operate on a waiting list, and the amount of public housing waiting list is chronological, and the Section 8 wait list is basically a lottery. So your name can get pulled off of that lottery at any point in time. But the public housing one, it does have to do with the bedroom size, the family size, what the needs. There are certain things that move people up on a wait list. We have preferences for people that are homeless, for instance. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess so. There's no system where you can say, okay, the resources we have in Roanoke are going to stay in Roanoke until we have an excess of occupancy, and we'll take people to Hampton Roads and New York and Massachusetts.
Well, we don't. The people that apply to make the wait list are local. You can apply from out of town. That's possible, but in a Section 8 opportunity, that's affordable. You can go anywhere in the country with it. But the wait list does, all that's evaluated, and I can double check on it. I'm pretty sure that you have to be local at the time of application if you want to get the housing.
Perhaps that woman had moved and moved back, I don't know. All I know, she told me she was from Hampton Roads, just moved here and had an apartment, and wanted back in there.
It could have just been the timing and the size of the unit that was available too. She got it quicker.
And the homelessness problem has been obviously increased. Yes, thank you, from COVID. But a lot of these rural communities, a lot of these rural governments, these county governments, they've never had to deal with homelessness before, and it's showing up in their backyard. And until our surrounding jurisdictions, and this is where we can incorporate the Roanoke Valley Allegheny Regional Planning Commission, who serves some of these outside areas, a holistic plan on how to address their own housing needs instead of relying on Roanoke. We're a little bit behind on that, but I think the awareness from some of the more rural governments out there are starting to be aware that this is a problem they're facing. Yes.
This is from, I don't have any data that's newer than 2 years ago, but there were a number of reasons why we have people here settling in the Roanoke Valley who are not from the Roanoke Valley is because they come to access services at the VA, and they stay in the community to be close to their mental health providers. So that increases the number of people who are from outside our area as well.
Good point.
My name is Jeff Hazlett, and I'm here to address two problems that we have with a lot of the homelessness. I ain't talking about people down on their luck because lost a job and need housing, and it's hard to find affordable housing. I understand that. But we got a lot of problems around Roanoke. There's a place right down the road here behind the store where you got homelessness, that you got drug addiction, and you got mental problems these people have. And they don't want help. They like to live where they can continue to get their drugs, and the families gave up on them. And they don't mind living out on the street. They'll go out and panhandle, and they'll go out like they're at Crossroads, right behind Lowe's. They're encampment out there. They go into Kroger's, take what they want, and walk out the door. Kroger's don't do anything about it. I've talked to managers at K&W, Krispy Kreme, Kroger's, BJ's, Sam's. All of them tell me pretty much the same thing. The city will not help them. Now, the general manager at Krispy Kreme did put up no trespassing signs because the city says we can't do anything unless you do that. He done that, still no results. talked to safety director for Roanoke Regional Airport, Ben Cook. He said, Jeff, I call the city once or twice a week about this problem. Just, I'm talking to deaf ears. I have been talking to Clarence Greer, the deputy city manager, for this past year. He keeps on, we're working on it, Jeff, we're working on it. I gave up on him. The last time I talked to him, the state's going to help us. I've talked to Winsome Sears in person about that. He says, I need more information. I can't get nothing from the city. Basically, I mean, that's the part I want. I don't want to see people out there that have mental problems and drug problems, because they will do harm to one of the citizens of Roanoke. And when out there panhandling on the medium, all they got to do is just lose their balance, because the medium ain't no wider than that, and lose their balance and fall into oncoming traffic and get hit and get hurt bad. Well, the person driving the car might face a lawsuit even though they didn't do anything wrong. Salem does do a good job about not letting them be on the medium. Panhandling is called First Amendment right. You can't stop that. But they do stop them from getting on the medium. I think Roanoke City needs to step up and do that, because I don't want to see nobody get run over, and the person driving the car that didn't do anything wrong, I don't want them to face the consequences. Everybody thinks that there's no consequences. Yeah. Or, you might get sued. And I think the city needs to step up, and I think that the deputy city manager didn't do his job. I'm a concerned citizen, been living in Roanoke all my life, and I'm a landlord as well, and I don't charge people out big for rental property. I tell them when they move in, you come in and stay for 10 years, your rent would never go up. The 10th year, I'm going to go look at the increase of real estate tax, insurance, and I'll probably increase it to that amount. You take care of me, I'll take care of you. And that's what a lot of landlords in Roanoke need to do, is if you've got a good tenant and they're willing to work with you, you don't try to go up. I didn't go up on this where the rent and housing has went up big time in the last few years. I didn't take advantage of that. Like I said, but at the same time, I think the city does need to address people who got mental issues should not be on the street, and drug addicts, because that's a danger to them and danger to regular day citizens. I think Roanoke City needs to step up on that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm Elizabeth. I worked in homeless services for a while, but now I'm just a normal Roanoke City citizen. And I know homelessness is very complex and it cannot be simplified. So some of the things that I would love to see happen with the funds that are going to come available, I would love to see a multi-approach to it. So whether that's a shelter where they can have their own space, maybe have some ownership of that space to where it is a community. I'd love to see new housing that is kept affordable for the citizens of Roanoke, that are on the SSDI, that only receive, or the SSI, who only receive the 871. When you think about affordable housing, you have to think about, yes, $550 for housing sounds affordable to someone who works a normal job, but when you only receive 871, then you have utilities, then you have your $30 bus pass, then you have your food. That funding goes away very quickly. If you have any co-pays with your medications, those funds, it's quick, it's gone. It's hard to get caught up if you get behind on your rent. So, finding that affordable housing for new housing, refurbished housing, seeing a shelter that works for the people who sheltered normally doesn't work for, just a multi-faceted approach to the homeless population, because our homelessness all look different and all of them have a different story to tell. And then I would also like to just keep in mind that I think a lot of times our programs address families and the single individual people without families. HUD opening up their policies to allow an uncommon family unit to be housed together. You know, this isn't necessarily my husband, but he's my life partner, or this is my my brother, my sister, because that's how our homeless identify their family units. It's not the normal family HUD traditional unit. So, like, just being creative in our solutions, I think, is really what it's going to take to address the homelessness in Roanoke. I appreciate everyone voicing their opinion.
Thank you. And our office also works with our Fair Housing Board, appointed by City Council to address fair housing complaints. And family status is actually a protected class in our fair housing law, both federally and statewide. So, you know, to hear something like that is you can't do that. You can't deny someone housing because of their family status. But yeah, that's something that we see a lot too. And surprisingly, we're just wrapping up an analysis of impediment to fair housing, and just got the report from our consultant this week. And only 22% of the people who responded, of almost 500 to our public survey, had felt that they felt comfortable to report a fair housing violation. Over 51% had experienced some type of fair housing discrepancy, but only 22% had reported it. So, yeah, there's a lot of public outreach and public information that we have to do too, to help people know that things like that can't happen.
Hi, my name's Hannah. I'm a peer recovery specialist at Carilion, and I'm also a community health worker. And I really like the idea and have been thinking about it for a while of we have so many properties that are unused in Roanoke any longer, like hotels. I live in the west end of the city, and there's so much empty space that even around public housing that is just not being utilized. And just, I would love to see something like a hotel that could have the different floors for different transitions throughout housing or throughout whatever kind of needs the person is going through, whether that be like a wraparound service or even getting Carilion involved in that way, because we have all of these services that are available, and then could also tie in like housing patient families. Like, there's just so many options that I think even a hotel like that is instead being torn down could be utilized for. And as far as there are so many barriers, not only to like whether or not someone is to go to the mission, for example, if someone is actively using or misses a day because they've wanted to stay with a friend, they then have to wait a full 24 hours before they can even go back. And it's not just people that are actively using or having a mental health crisis, it's also people that are using some kind of psychotropic medication that doesn't allow them into a program, or people with disabilities. They will not house. I see patients at the hospital all the time that have some sort of complication from IV drug use that are now trying to get into recovery and have lost a limb and cannot go to the mission because they can't walk. Same with like at the Trust House, they could be able to go there, but they only have rooms on the second floor at this point, and those people can't be housed there. The vouchers are great. I have quite a few people that I work with that get a voucher but then have no way to use it. So I think if there could be a way that we could all like use our services together in one place, because once someone is situated somewhere, they don't want to leave that place because it's theirs and they have all of their things there. So I think it would work much better if we could come to them in the same area. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. Good comments. Keep it up. Who's next? Hi.
I'm Brandy. I'm a resident of Roanoke City. I have been for quite some time, but I also am a nurse case manager with one of the managed care organizations in our area. And I work exclusively with this serious mentally ill population. And so I would like to see a lot of the unused buildings and the hotels and things also as well be utilized for that, because I feel like a lot of the traditional low-income housing that we have in the area has so many restrictions on it, it excludes a lot of the homeless population. A lot of the members on my caseload of 131 members that I have, many are homeless, and they do not fit into or meet the requirements for the traditional low-income housing in this area. But along with that, I would also like to see some of the money spent on mental health services. I think that's a really important part. It's hard to stabilize somebody once they've been homeless for so long. Trying to integrate them back into a normal way of living, a healthy way of living, can be very challenging. And I also think that part of that needs to be mental health services. A lot of the hospitals don't have the resources for long-term treatment, so they try to stabilize them the best they can with medications and then kind of kick them back out on the street. But when you're homeless, I mean, how hard is it to like stay on your medications when you're homeless, you know? And your main priority is trying to get food, or it may be your drug use because that's what you're used to. So I think that we're definitely in need of both, of wraparound services, because I think for it to take really long-term effects and be beneficial to people, they really need those different levels of treatment also as well. But having them a safe place to live and somewhere that is their space that they feel safe in is the first step, and then being able to get them the services that they need to stabilize them, I believe, is really important as well. Because it's a really sad situation that we have in Roanoke right now with the drug use, with the mental illness. Honestly, I've only been a nurse for about a year now, and I never knew. I thought there was just like all kinds of things out there for mental illness help and stuff because you see it on TV, you hear people talk about it. But when you actually get to working in it and you try to actually help people, there's not that much. I mean, I won't say nothing, but there's really not that much. And when it comes to trying to get those services to homeless people, population in our community, is even more challenging because you have to try to track them down if they don't have a stable place to stay. So I believe some would maybe be more willing to utilize mental health services if they had a stable place to live and they weren't constantly in fear or living on the street or trying to scrounge for food. So I believe both of those services together are very important, and I would really like to see some of the money spent for things like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know our office was fortunate enough, was it last year, I guess, some of the CARES Act money that we received, told you it couldn't go for housing, but we were able to partner, provide some funding to the Bradley Free Clinic. They did an entire new wing onto their facility in Southwest because of the boom they had seen in mental health referrals and drop-ins since COVID. So you're exactly right. Now, this mental health has become more of a community problem, not just Roanoke, but nationwide since the pandemic. And, we tried to address with those funds, but you're absolutely right. Housing is not the end-all, be-all. There's got to be some wraparound services and bring these folks out of the situation they're in.
I just wanted to hop on that. You reminded me of an issue that we come across a lot in our patient population is people that are hospitalized either for endocarditis or abscesses, or I have a guy with a broken jaw right now that we've been trying to get into surgery for over a year now. And when the hospital tries to discharge them, they're like, he can't keep this open wound on his arm clean for a week and come back to his appointment in a week. He lives on this street. And so if we're really getting innovative here, having some temporary housing for people that are medically recovering that are unhoused would be awesome.
Good idea, thank you.
Hi,
Hello,
I'm
Dawn.
Dawn, and I wasn't going to come up here, but I have been talking with the city multiple times over the last 4 years about a tiny house village concept. I'm on the teams with Matt and them. We're serving the same folks, but I think a lot that has been stated and restated here is the need for not only for non-congregant living, but for something that is quickly able to be produced. When we talk about building affordable housing, it's always a futuristic approach to a problem that we have right now. And so, you know, the tiny house model, whatever that may look like for us locally here, could give us an opportunity to have transitional housing. It could be a place where the homeless services would be fishing in a barrel. They know where people are located. We could bring in behavioral health. We could bring in job fairs. We could bring in medical services that could come into the housing village or whatever you want to refer to it as. But it would be an, in the meantime, option as we work to get people in a more stable place, whether it's with mental illness, substance abuse. We absolutely do not have access enough to treatment here for substance abuse in Roanoke. I don't think that it's being done well anywhere, honestly, in our country with the current epidemic of substance abuse, but we don't have enough access to inpatient residential treatment, long-term treatment, you know, so those are definitely things that need to be addressed. But I think from the housing perspective, what we've been doing over and over again is not working as well, and we need something that can be created relatively quickly that can address our current situation.
Thank you. I can interject now. We've opened up our process for applications for our regular entitlement funds. We just had our public meeting and application workshop last week, and we as a city, we're shifting our focus, which has primarily been on single-family home ownership with the use of our housing funds. We know that, particularly in Belmont-Fallon, which is our current target area, that the demand for rental property is probably higher at this point. So we're looking at, we're actively seeking applications for more multifamily rental, affordable rental development. You know, again, we've got a limited pool of funds, so we have to spend our money strategically, but I think we can probably make a bigger impact by looking at trying to invest in some multifamily affordable housing as well, not just the single family. There's a lot of room out there too for low-density rental property as well. I know there's one organization that we have funded that have done a couple, a single family and a duplex, preserved a beautiful old homes in Belmont-Fallon, and got happy families living there now. But again, we can't keep pursuing the old model of single-family home ownership. We've got to broaden our horizon a little bit. But that also brings up another point, too, that a lot of times what we face in the city, you know, the idea of the tiny houses and how we house folks, obviously our zoning codes can be part of the solution or can be part of the looking at zoning, but you've also got NIMBYism. A lot of folks don't want that type of development in their neighborhood. And so that's something we're always fighting too, that these are great ideas, but where do you put them? But thank you, Dawn. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever thought of I know there's zoning issues, but in areas that would allow it. You know, some people are aging and maybe their spouse has passed away. They may have a basement. They could be turned into an apartment. They're sitting in a big old house by themselves. Do you have any kind of incentive possibly you can give to current homeowners to portion out a portion of their house as a rental?
The Planning Commission took steps recently with revising our zoning code to allow for accessory, not detached dwelling units in all zones in the city. So if folks have a garage or have a place on their property that could house someone, they're now able to develop those properties to address housing needs.
Right, because if you can give that homeowner an incentive, you know, or a retired person on a fixed income struggling, you could say, well, we can give you $500 a month of Section 8 housing money, you know, and that, they could use that to benefit themselves, to buy food and medicine, and then somebody has a home.
Right.
And I don't mean to beat a dead horse. I just want you to know what it feels like to live in Southeast, okay? I'm 5'2", maybe 135, 40 pounds, I don't know. So I'm coming home from Walmart at night on Dale Avenue, and I'm trying to take a left-hand turn on 13th Street, and I have a very little Nissan Altima, and there's some tall dude, possibly with a mental problem or on drugs, and he's standing there over my car, panhandling. You know, that's a very vulnerable position to be in. I live across the street from the park, and that's why I bought that house, because I had the park in front of me. It used to be kids from Morningside would go over there for their recess, and I just love watching the kids and hearing the laughter. Well, now we have pieces of clothing over there. We have syringes on the ground, broken liquor bottles and whatnot. I walk my dog every day. I have to be very careful about where she steps. Just 2 weeks ago, within 2 weeks, I had to call the police 3 different times. On one occasion, I was trying to walk my dog during the day, and there's a very tall guy up at the playground with a metal pole banging up the playground and then the picnic pavilion, so I turned in the opposite direction. I was just going to go home. Well, he got on the path and started following me, so I cut over to the grass towards the basketball court. He cut over in the grass towards the basketball court. You know, he's like 6 foot something. And so my neighbor saw what was happening, so I beelined to his house, and we called the police. And the police couldn't do anything because he hadn't assaulted me. But then, just not even a week after that, I'm in the park during the day again, just trying to walk my dog. And, you know, you've got some kid that got into a dispute with some other, I say kids, 18 to 20, you know, and he's running around chasing everybody with a knife trying to kill him. So I call that in, you know. You've also, this is an area, I know that we have veterans, you know, which my heart really goes out to them, and we owe everything to veterans. And I know we have people with mental illnesses and addictions and whatnot, but we also have an age group of people that I talk to that are on the street right now, living in the home, you know, on the streets. And I said, well, why aren't you living with your parents? And they're like, well, we just don't see eye to eye. So, you know, they don't want to get along with their parents if they choose to live on the street. I think we need to be very careful about enabling a behavior of, well, if you don't get along with your parents, you could live with them and they can teach you how to get a job. You know, I think we need to be wise and not enable people into that lifestyle also.
And again, maybe the parent doesn't get along with the child either. So it's, you know, yes, there are some youth out there that are facing some difficult times at home, and we're seeing that. Our school system, how many was in the last monthly report? 400 maybe? Yeah. We all are on the Blue Ridge Interagency Council on Homelessness, and the public schools have a liaison, homeless liaison, and come to these meetings, and the statistics she's giving us of school children and families that are homeless or couch surfing or do not have stable housing is mind-blowing. It really is, yeah. Would love, I don't know if anybody out there has experienced homelessness or have some life experiences that we'd love to hear from you. You know, is there anyone that's got any stories that they would like to share or experiences?
not a night that people that are unhoused want to be out and walking about. So I will, unless there's anybody else here that wants to share that experience, I can kind of speak for the people that I represent and I work with. I think everybody that I see, have relationships with, spend time with every day, a lot of times people think like, oh, we're homeless because we choose to be homeless, right? You talk about the kids that are train hoppers, you know, I just don't get along with my parents. I'm thinking of one person right now who is a trans woman, would love to go home and live with her family in South Boston, but they won't accept her. They won't use her real name. They won't use her real pronouns. And so she can't go home, and she can't avail herself of a traditional recovery program, and she can't, you know, doesn't feel safe or comfortable at the mission, despite the work that they're trying to do to improve their services there. And so, you know, when a kid says, oh, like, we don't get along with my parents, to me, I mean, I work with, it's intergenerational. Like, I have participants that they learn to sell drugs from their parents who learned it from their grandparents. When we have people coming up to the van for our syringe services and our wraparound supportive services, we have grandma, mom, and daughter come. These problems are really intractable, and it's literally just one paycheck. And actually, a lot of the work that the service agencies do here is people will come up saying, my lights got turned off, you know, Child Protective Services is about to, you know, take me off and evict me, take away my kids and stuff. And it's like they get like $200 behind, right? I have a participant whose neighbor wasn't giving him his mail, and so he was about to lose all of his utilities because the participant his neighbor hadn't given him his mail, and it was all about to be turned off that day. And so we're scrambling with Presbyterian churches and Ram House, and there's a lot of people here that will work really hard to keep people housed, but it is literally one paycheck, one medical bill, being sick for a week. You know, a lot of people work hour to hour. They don't have salaried jobs. And so I think the thing that when somebody says, like, they want to be homeless, they don't want help. It's not that they don't want help. Nobody wants to live out on the street. Okay, there's like 5 guys that live up on Mill Mountain. Like, one guy's actually built himself a log cabin up there. Maybe they want to live on their own in the woods by themselves. But the people that you're seeing panhandling out there day in and day out, they don't want to be there. It is hard. It is a hard life out there. It is painful. It is emotionally and mentally draining. It creates mental illness. It creates addiction and substance use disorder, because that's what you have to do to survive. A lot of people sell drugs just to find a place to sleep at night. Most people don't know this, but what they're paying at the hotels to pay for a month, well, they pay week to week if they're lucky. If they can scrounge together enough money to pay for week, it's $1,200 a month to stay in those hotels. They are paying double what they would pay in the rental. Why? Because they have a felony, because they have a mental illness, because they have substance use disorder, which is an illness just like any other and should be treated as such. And so I would just, like, anytime I have this conversation with people, they're not so different from us, and they're not so othered. I think we've all been in situations before where we're this close to the edge, right? And once you're out there on the street, once you're there, that's why there's so much funding available for preventing homelessness, because once you're out there, it is a hell of a lot harder to get them back into stability. So that's what I would just say, is that there's so many reasons that play into homelessness, and that the reason that they're refusing help, and this is no shade to you guys, but we can go stand at the Hat at 6 a.m. You have to be there at 6 a.m. They open at 8. There's 3 intakes a day. We could do all of that, but if they've already done that once before, or they did that 2 years ago and there was no housing, so you go through all of this, bring up all of your trauma that you've experienced in order to get a housing voucher, and then there's no housing. So why would I go through all of that time and effort and mental, emotional energy, getting my hopes up for it to just fall through. So when people say, I don't want that help, when they refuse help, you have to understand that that's probably not the first time they're refusing help. That's probably not the first time they've been offered that. And that I think when we talk about all the side effects of having unhoused people, the syringes, the mental illness, the dangers, all of that kind of stuff, I think what we're doing here tonight is exactly how we should be addressing it, is how do we wrap these people up in support and love, get to the root of what is causing their issues, treat them like a whole human being that has a really windy, twisty backstory, and take care of them. And that's the way, that's the best way, because it's like, you know, people have been dealing with homeless services and issues and homelessness crisis for decades in this country, and the only thing that works is actually taking care of the people and focusing on the people and getting them into a warm, safe place with all the support and love that they need.
Thanks, Danny.
So I am, as a peer recovery specialist, I'm a person in recovery, either from substance use, mental illness, or both. Mine's both, mainly, and I'm an alcoholic. When I first got out of rehab, I was lucky enough that my dad was willing to pay my bond to get me. He actually had to put up his house to get me out of jail. And I went to rehab, had to live with my dad as part of my bond. But then when I go to move in with my best friend at my rental, the place I still live, on Salem Avenue, I could not sign the lease because of my DUIs, and I did not have a felony. So that's one example, and that's not even a felony. That's just looking at the fact that I have addiction in my past. I think that there are multiple people that I have worked with that come to the hospital, they have their treatment for 6 weeks because of endocarditis, osteomyelitis, anything like that. They begin to see what recovery can look like, but then due to their health issues that they're still experiencing, or because they're still on medication because of their heart issues, they can't go into a rehab, or they can't go into a Medicaid-funded rehab. They don't have any money because they were just in the hospital for 6 weeks, and someone probably has most likely, in most of the cases I've experienced, stolen their food stamp card. They've lost their house if they had one, so their only hope is to go back into a home that they left at a young age because of the trauma, and they go back into that home where the parents are using, and they experience it right over again. So like they'd rather go. I have a girl I started working with her 2 years ago. She had just turned 18, and she had osteomyelitis, and she has had endocarditis the most that Carillion has ever seen. She's had it at least 8 times in the past 2 years. And she gets better, she gets healthier, but there's nothing for her. She has no legal charges, nothing on her record but her illness. She can't work because her heart doesn't let her, she can't stand up for more than 10 minutes, and she doesn't have anywhere to go. And we could give her everything, but the only thing she knows is how to go get a room at a hotel, sell drugs for a night, and then she can maybe live for a week. So it's just, it might not be that I don't think, nobody that I have come across wants to live outside. There's one man that I've met that likes it, and that was only in the summer. Then in the winter, he's like the first one to run to Nights Inn and try to get a room as quickly as he can. So as far as like parents and children not getting along, like that's not always an option. A lot of the people that I know that are like in the LGBTQ community, they can't go home, like what was said, and then they can't go to the mission. If you go to the mission and express that, or if you go to some of these services and express your personal self, you're not allowed there. So there's just so much that goes into it that I think needs to just, if we all were more aware of the problem that it actually is, maybe some people would pay a bit more attention, and just like getting to know the person. That's what we really need to spend time doing, is getting to know the person and figuring out what it is that they actually want. Because they might not, if you go up to someone and say like, I can give you a house today, do you want it? They're gonna say no because they know what they're doing. Fear is a big part of not changing, so I think we need to pay attention to that.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any other, where are we at on time here?
I'd like to make a couple of comments. You brought up potential land use changes, and I think that's a really important one that needs to be seriously considered. Ideas such as maybe upzoning a little bit, but only in cases of where it's for affordable housing, and not just in Belmont, Fallon Park, across the city, so that maybe it's a change in the zoning that allows that middle housing, 4 families, 6 unit apartments, but that are not just in this area. I mean, we have to share around the city a little bit more. With regards, I've heard so many people mention the support services. That was one of your main points up here, whether more money should be put to that. And that's a really important topic, even with the people who are already receiving assistance. Too often, vouchers become Band-Aids, and the housing instability remains. And I'm speaking now as a landlord. I live and I rent in Southeast. And I do still have several people that receive vouchers. They need ongoing support. Giving them a voucher, giving them some utility assistance doesn't just solve the challenge. They still remain unstable in that house. And I'm speaking as someone that sees it fairly often. They need ongoing counseling. And I really think if you're going to give support, financial support, there has to be mandated education with it. Okay? And I know the housing authority's strapped, a lot of the social service agencies are strapped, but maybe that's where we can put some of that money to give that kind of support. I mean, I have a tenant recently, if you're looking for anecdotes, who's receiving a voucher, a partial voucher. Her car breaks. She has to get to Taco Bell. She has to get there. She needs to get a car. She tells me, I got a car. I said, how much did you pay for it? She had no idea. I said, what's the interest rate on the loan? She had no idea. All she knew was the monthly payment. And just by giving them a voucher isn't doing it. We have to help them maintain some type of stability with that voucher, so that they're growing and learning so that they can wean themselves off the voucher. So I think using some of that money more strategically to help these people get some financial literacy, learn some household skills to maintain a household, that'll help solidify the neighborhoods and perhaps make them more successful in the future.
And those of you who are not aware, there's a financial empowerment center that started a year or so ago with the city, and their goal is to help folks in establishing, budget and how to get out of that cycle of poverty. But there is a service offered through the city, through, is it Freedom First Credit Union, called the Financial Empowerment Center. So feel free to reach out to my office, and I can put you in touch with those folks if your tenants would like to have that service. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'm Natalie Klein, and I am the Agape Aftercare case manager at the Roanoke Rescue Mission. And I just want to echo a lot of what was just said about how important wraparound services are for our folks that are receiving vouchers and receiving assistance. And they need that extra measure of support and encouragement to say, yes, you can do this. Can't remember who said about the level of fear. I've worked at the mission for 8 years, and I've had this conversation many times with our guests that are about to move out, and then they'll roll back and be like, nope. And I'm friends with somebody that has been out of the mission for 5+ years now, And I had a real heart-to-heart conversation with her, and I said, tell me why it took you so long, because she had opportunity after opportunity to go. And she said, Miss Natalie, I've never lived by myself. I went from living with my abusive father to an abusive relationship, and I came here, and I feel safe, and I'm scared to live by myself. And so there's a lot of that. I have so many guests that have never made a budget before. They have no clue. You know what you said about the car payments, all of that. And the Financial Empowerment Center, I'm like their biggest cheerleader. I think they're like one of the best things that has ever happened in Roanoke, and I'm just so excited that we partner with them so well. But I know for a fact that right now they are short-staffed, as are all of us. So, but they are doing their best to come around folks that maybe have never done this budgeting thing before. And also just to the other conversations about our specifically 18 to 24-year-old young adults and LGBTQIA+ community, that is my heartbeat. I do whatever I can to reach that community, especially in that 18 to 24-year-old folks, especially that have aged out of foster care, or, you know, I am like a mama bear. I have taken in my child's friends because their parents are like, oh, you're 18. It is time for you to go. We're done. And, you know, or their parent chose drugs over parenting them well. And they had I not opened up my home to them for a couple of years so they could like learn how to budget and do all those things, they would be very much, they'd be one of your clients, you know? And so I really think what I hear, you know, there's a lot of things that I've heard, but, you know, zoning is important and finding housing and using these empty spaces. But the bottom line is relationships and looking at these folks in the eyes and finding out what's your story and what's your name, because there is so much more to somebody that is standing on the corner looking for a handout than just that sign they're holding. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm no longer a member of this community, but I lived here for over 10 years. In 2019, I lost my job from one of the top 5 banks. At the end of 2019, I suffered a heart attack. I was living off my retirement. My landlords of 8 years decided to sell the home. So October of 2020, I no longer had a home. The move was rough on me. I ended up being hospitalized. I was in the hospital for maybe a day, and then I had no place to go. I didn't have anything lined up. And I was very, very short on funds at that time. Unemployment had ran out. So all I had was my retirement. I didn't know how long I was going to be unemployed. Going from $50,000 to food stamps in, what, less than 30 days? It's a lot of things to consider. So I ended up spending a month in a hotel that cost $1,000. It was not cost effective. So I had a few choices to make. Had to either pay the bills that I still owed or let my credit ruin, have no option, and live on the street. I still had my vehicle, so I was living in my vehicle for a while. I ended up staying with another individual and paying them rent. And You get into the complaints that you had, things were stolen out of where I was staying. They shut the heat off, water, just anything you could imagine. I didn't have the funds to fight that fight, so I had to leave. Every time you leave somewhere, it costs you money, especially if you expect to take your belongings. I worked at a top 5 bank for almost 10 years. I still had my stuff, and I wasn't about to just let it go. So I put my stuff in a storage unit, and I ended up living there for as long as I could. When you're down, there are elements of people that want to take advantage of you, whether that be with drugs and alcohol, trying to get whatever money you have, or just use you because they think they can. I don't allow myself to be used no matter what the situation, so that costs more money to get out of that. In fact, it doubled my eventual cost. I lived off $13,000 for almost 2 years. September of this year, I finally got into a place where I'm semi-stable. It's just not in this community. Went to get help here several times. Went to get help when I was in the hotel. I was told that because I was spending the night somewhere, technically I wasn't homeless. It didn't make sense because I was recovering from a medical condition to leave the hotel to get help that I had no idea what that help would be. There are a lot of different services in this area, a lot of different restrictions, no communication and no collaboration that I can see. Standing 6 o'clock in the morning, when they open at 8, spending 2 hours out of your time to be there, when you're trying to work, when you're trying to get a job, when you're trying to survive, it's not reasonable. It's a full-time job facing the bureaucracy of homelessness. When I need a different full-time job that actually pays me full-time money. $10 an hour won't cut it, $12 an hour won't cut it. In my case, and this is specific to me, even $15 an hour wouldn't cut it. I had to go from $50,000 to $50,000. Because when the vultures come, they all come at once. You're working. Everybody lines up to get paid. And you can't pay them all at once. You can't pay them all in 6 months. You have to bide your time, pace that out. Being in a storage unit in the middle of summer, it's not a good time. The heat in there probably gets 110, 120. Being in there in winter, it gets cold. Luckily, I have plenty of insulation for myself. And I don't get cold that easy, not from where I'm from. So I came up here for 2 reasons: to share that information. Was it my choice to be homeless? Yes. It was the only option to maintain a potential future for me. So that's why I did it. But in taking that choice, I'm not going to get walked on or walked over. I went to that meeting, showed up 8 a.m. I had a 1.5 hour. They told me it'd take an hour and a half. I said, you start firing questions, I'll start giving you answers, because I already had all the information. They got me out there in time to get to work, but the assistance that I would receive was $300 for a deposit on a place. That's not going to help me. Thank you for your time. So I just did it my own way. And luckily, I ended up in a job where I make just under 50. It's still going to take me 2 years to recover financially, but I'm going to recover. If I had an option other than homelessness and still save my future, I would have taken it. Because you're right, it's hard. It's hard on your body. It's hard on your mental stability. It's hard just having relationships because people don't get it. They don't understand. And they look at you like you've lost something. People I've known for years, 10 years, just walked away. And I'm okay with that. That's their choice. But in my eyes, that was a stupid thing to do. But I wanted to share that just so you have an idea. It can happen to anyone. If you don't have, well, in my case, I did, and it happened anyway. I had my retirement to fall back on, and I still ended up on the street because I'd rather pay those bills than not have a future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very nice thoughts. Congratulations on moving forward, and wish you the best. Thank you. Okay. All right, anybody want to follow that up? All right, we're about wrapped up. If we want to go to the next slide, if there are no other comments, are there any other? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. What system specifically? Expound on that. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
It's only by the grace of God that I'm not homeless, because there have been 2 times in my life when I was without a place to live. And it only takes a really bad health situation to take everything away from you, and that's what happened to me. But going back to the $300 isn't enough. And, you know, when I moved back to this area, I slept on a couch in a basement for 6 months until I could find a place that I could afford. And I really can't afford the place I'm in now, so I'm going to have to wind up looking some more. Goes back to the problem of we don't have enough resources, and $300 isn't enough. And so what are we going to do about the 30 or 40% of people that are coming into our area when we don't have enough to take care of our own? So is there anything we can do, a message we can get out? I'm sorry, you know, Floyd hasn't caught up with Roanoke yet, and I don't mean to sound uncompassionate. It's not that. It's just that I care about the people that we already have. You know, the LGBT community that doesn't have a place to go. Because there's real situations like that. I have a daughter who's gay, and, you know, I'm very in tune with the community, and I have a lot of compassion for them. And the kids that are living out there that say they don't get along with their parents, I've gotten to know them, and what's the issue? You know, is it they want you to work and you're not ready to work because you don't have the confidence? You know, we're having the job fairs, but what I'm saying is, can we just use the resources to try and take care of the people we have right now? And is there anything we can do to stop the influx of more people coming into our area until we can get the system down and fix the system that can offer somebody like him more than $300? You know, and more affordable housing and the options that you need for the LGBT community that don't feel safe in, you know, a situation where they might be haste about it. So, is there anything we can do? Can we stop this? Can we put a message out? Can we put a Roanoke ambassador at the bus stop and say, I know it sounds almost cruel, but, we can't keep taking in everybody else when we can't take care of our own right now with what we have properly.
Well, again, I think the Roanoke Valley Allegheny Regional Planning Commission would be a really good resource. I know Brian Hill, who's a planner with him. I'm going to see him later this week. I'm leaving tonight to drive up to Arlington for the Virginia Governor's Housing Conference. I know he's going to be there as well as a lot of other housing service providers and local governments in Virginia. So it's going to be interesting to see what some of the sessions are dealing with homelessness and affordable housing and how other communities are addressing similar situations that don't just send everyone to the largest neighboring community to you. Those are problems you got to fix at home. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. Code enforcement is a big part of the solution, or a big part of the, yes, yeah.
I just wanted to address, because there has been a few people bringing up people being bused into Roanoke, and a lot of the homeless people that end up in Roanoke and end up homeless, they have a plan when they come here. They came to Roanoke to stay with a friend, to stay with a family member. There are people that come to Roanoke that are released from prison. That is a true story. There are people who are in local prisons that don't have people that pick them up when they're released, and they come to whatever city there's a homeless shelter in, or whatever the situation may be. But a lot of the people that our ministry works with that are homeless, that are from other areas, they come here with a plan. They don't just up and say, well, Roanoke has a good homeless shelter, so I'm just going to get on a bus and come there. There is a plan in place, and then, as most of us know, you move in with a friend that lasts 30 minutes or so, and then you're arguing and you got to go. So I think that a lot of the homelessness that results from people coming to Roanoke isn't necessarily because they were homeless when they arrived. It's something that happens to them in a short time after they arrive. So I just don't want people to feel like we just have full buses of people that are coming to the Roanoke area that are homeless. There are some, but the largest majority of them, that's something that takes place after that. And I would also like to remind people that we can't criminalize homelessness. There are people who do not choose to live in a brick and mortar house. And I think a lot of times we feel like we have a right to force them to do that. They are sanctioned human beings. I'm not saying that they should be approaching you, asking you for money. I'm not saying that they should make you feel threatened or unsafe or any of that. But what I am saying is that just like we choose where we live, these are sanctioned human beings, and we can't decide for them what the trajectory of their life is going to be. So I think when we're talking about our homeless population, we need to keep that in mind.
Thank you. All right, it's we're getting close to 7:30. Couple announcements. Were there any? Are those sign-up sheets? Couple things in closing. The next steps. Where do we go from here? Once the allocation plan has been drafted and we're ready to send it to City Council, there'll be a public notification period. We're required to have our citizen participation plan requires us to have a 30-day public comment period on any substantial amendments to our consolidated plan, and this would bringing this money in would trigger that. So, there will be a notice for public input. There will be a City Council meeting. We're hoping January, February. we've got to have the plan into HUD before March 31st. I think we're going to be in good shape getting it in on time, but that is the next step. How long it takes HUD once they get the allocation plan in, before they approve it and give us a funding agreement, who knows? What we're hoping to do is to be able to have these funds approved and allocated by HUD in time to reach out to the to nonprofit community and housing providers to take applications on how these funds can be spent. Long story short, we're hoping to try to have these funds available around September 1st of 2023. We've got till September 2030 to expend these funds, but we know that they're needed now. But we've got to get this plan approved by HUD first before we can access those funds. Next slide, please. Okay. Okay. All right. A couple things in closing. First of all, thank you to Terry Brace and the Belmont Christian Church and the congregation for allowing us to use your facility tonight and for what you're doing here in Southeast Roanoke. And I just want to give a personal thanks to all the social workers out there that are fighting the good fight. It's a hard job. This is not going to be something that can be solved overnight. We didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to turn around the next day. But it is going to take a coordinated effort from the city to prioritize housing as something that the city should do. So thank you all again for coming out tonight. My contact information, if anyone still has any comments, or those of you that were on that were watching on YouTube and the live stream that didn't have a chance to comment, you've got my email address there. Would love to hear from you, and those comments be made part of the public input on the allocation plan. Thank you, everyone. Be safe out there, bad weather, and take care. Thank you. Okay.